Welcome back. All right. I want to talk about the Ducks today. I'm just, I got these magnets today. I've got the new jersey and everything. And I was like, the Ducks are doing pretty well right now. And so looking at their most recent three games, which they've won all three, but their upcoming schedule makes things a little more interesting. So we'll go over the upcoming schedule, but I do want to talk about the three wins they've had. I want to talk about some of the young players and their production so far this year. So the start of this current winning streak was against Detroit. They won that game 6-4, and Detroit's had their issues this year. Absolutely. Leo Carlson had 2 assists in that game. John Gibson, 21 saves on 25 shots. Then they beat Dallas 4-2. Gauthier with a goal and an assist, and Dostal with 34 saves on 36 shots. And the most recent victory over Chicago, 3-2. Trevor Zegras with 2 assists, and John Gibson 18 saves on 20 shots. The goaltending from Lucas Dostal has brought us to this point where the Ducks are still alive in the hunt for a playoff spot, and things get really kind of interesting to look at. So, looking at the younger players, Leo Carlson's 19, 18 games, 6 goals, 4 assists, 10 points. They brought him along slowly. I think there's a lot there. I do think he's going to be a star player in the NHL. Mason McTavish is 21. He's played 13 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. Production probably not where McTavish would want it to be. I think there's room for growth there and for improvement. Olin Zellweger, also 21, 17 games, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points. And over the last couple of weeks, we've seen why Zellweger was a highly thought of prospect in the Anaheim organization, and he looks good. Then you got Cutter Gauthier, who, of course, they acquired from Philly. He's 20 years of age, 18 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points. After a slow start, I think he's been playing pretty well recently, too. Trevor Zegras is the most interesting name on the board. 23 years of age, 18 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. And I don't know that the trade rumors around Zegras are ever going to go away. I don't know that they will. I think part of it is we see a young player who's got a pretty good salary cap hit, and he's not necessarily producing the way that we thought he would. And so that makes him a natural pick as, hey, this guy could end up getting moved, right? And Zegras has a lot of flash to his game. There's discussion of whether or not he's overrated, and I'm not getting into that. But you do want more offense from him. Minchukov, 20 years of age, 17 games, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. Minchukov can be excellent on that blue line. He's had his struggles here and there early in the season, but I think he's a solid top 4 for them. Drew Hellison, 23 years of age, 3 games, 2 assists in his call-up. So taking him a little bit longer, but he's a defenseman. And so defenseman, that happens. Colangelo, 22 years of age. He has played 1 game since his call-up. Tristan Luneau, 20 years of age and 6 games played this year. No points for him. Lucas Dostal's 24, which again for a goaltender is young. 5-6-2 record, 924 save percentage, and a shutout. So there's a lot of young players contributing to this team. And when you look at the upcoming schedule, and remember, they're only 3 points out of a playoff spot, things get interesting. So they're at home on Friday against Buffalo. Buffalo's 9-1. And while the Sabres went in and beat LA last night, would we be surprised if Buffalo then lost to Anaheim? If you're a Sabres fan right now, you're answering with, that'd be a very Buffalo thing to do. Correct. And yes, then they're at home on Monday against Seattle. Seattle can be unpredictable too. Seattle's 10-9-1. Then they go to Seattle on the Wednesday. I'd be kind of surprised if Anaheim lost both ends of this. But again, that's a whole thing that we'll find out soon. Seattle has had their winning streaks. They've also had their frustrations and their inconsistencies. No idea what's going to happen there. Then Anaheim's at home against LA on Friday, the 29th of November. LA 10-7-3, generally better at home than on the road this season. But for LA, they've had their frustrations too. Definitely. And in terms of their offense, there's been some issues there. Then they're still at home for the next game. So they're at home for a while here. They're at home against the Ottawa Senators on Sunday, the 1st of December. Ottawa's 8-9-1. Ottawa's having plenty of frustrations this year. So this first 5 games, I would say Buffalo, that's winnable at home. Ottawa, that's winnable at home. And I could see them winning one of the 2 games against Seattle. So that'll be 3 wins in the next 5 games. I could see that. So even if they lose against Seattle, they'll lose against LA if they can win the others, and they could. Then they're still at home against Vegas on Wednesday the 4th. Vegas is 11-6-2. Anaheim plays them pretty tough. Anaheim absolutely plays them pretty tough. I would be kind of surprised if they beat Vegas. So let's just go ahead and say they win 3 of the next 6, right? Then they're still at home against Minnesota on Friday, the 6th of December. Minnesota is tough as they get. Minnesota's 12-3-3 on the season. So this is where maybe they may take a bit of a downturn, but then the schedule kind of helps them out again. So they go on the road, but they go to Montreal. Montreal has been playing better over the last week, I would say, than they've been playing most of the season. But Montreal's still 7-10-2. This game would be on Monday, December 9th. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's on Amazon Prime in Canada. But Anaheim, Montreal, that's a game that Anaheim, at that point, and this is where it's going to get interesting. If Anaheim has a strong record, say, over that 7-game period before playing Montreal, expectations start to shift a little bit. And that could be an interesting change. If Anaheim's kind of expected to win some games that they don't, see how they react to that. And then they're in Ottawa on the 11th of December, which is a Wednesday. Again, Ottawa's 8-9-1. And then they're in Toronto on Thursday the 12th. Toronto's 12-6-2. But last season, I do remember a game where Anaheim, didn't they go in and beat Toronto in Toronto last year? And it was like a just almost scandalous that Anaheim defeated Toronto in Toronto, and everybody was going to get traded after that one. I seem to remember anyways. But this is not an impossible schedule. This isn't a schedule that's dotted with a ton of teams that are considered to be Stanley Cup contenders right now. There is the possibility that Anaheim, if they play well, if they stay in their game, they've scored 13 goals over their last 3 games. If they can average about 3 goals a game over this next 10, we might be talking about Anaheim not as like a team that's on the outside looking in, but maybe a team that's surprisingly above the playoff line and asking questions about whether or not they can stay there. So their scoring is still an issue. 2.56 goals scored per game. They're 26th in the NHL. But as you can see, that is coming up. And I seem to remember doing a video on them not long ago where they were like 30th or 31st in goals scored per game. Goals against per game, and even 3. They're 14th in that category. If their defense plays better, and again, over their last 3 games, they've allowed 8 goals, so that's bringing their goals against down. If the defense continues to play improved hockey, and if Gibson can play as well as Dostal, or close to as well as Dostal, we're going to see that goals against come down. Now, their power play does need some work. 15.3%, that's 26th. Their penalty kill needs a lot of work. 68.8%, that's 29th. So they do need to work on that. Their special teams are an issue, but they're only 3 points out of a playoff spot. They're right there. And if you could get above that playoff line over the next 10 games, I think anything could be possible because their current cap space, according to Puckpedia, is ridiculous. $24,897,322, give or take. It's a lot of cap space. It's a lot of space that Pat Verbeek has to potentially go out and add a player or two if he chooses to and really solidify this team. I think if you added one more veteran forward and one more veteran blue liner, it could only help. Obviously, it would depend on who you're adding, but it could help. They could add another draft pick via maybe adding a higher contract, which would allow the team that's trading that contract to then maybe pick up another player. So I'm sure there'll be people in the comment section below like, my team needs to trade off this bad contract. But the Ducks could kind of pick and choose and decide who they're after, who they want, and it could get really interesting. They have extra draft picks in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round. I don't think they have a 2nd round draft pick, though. So those are draft picks that they could use in concert with the amount of cap space they have to improve their team. Now, maybe Pat Verbeek decides this isn't the time, this isn't the year, but since they've been out of the playoffs for so long, it'd be great to see the general manager say, all right, I have faith in this roster as is. I'm going to add, I'm going to get a forward, I'm going to get a defenseman. They don't need a goaltender. They certainly could trade John Gibson. That's a conversation we're going to continue to have, I think. I don't know that the market's there for Gibson at this point, and we'll get into why. So I want to talk about the money side of things. Troy Terry, $7 million cap hit until 2030. I didn't put him on the board because he's too old, in my opinion, to be here, but he's not an old player. So Troy Terry, good player. By the time that these guys all mature and become what they're going to be, I think Troy Terry will probably be about the 3rd best forward on the team. Alex Killorn, $6.25 million cap hit till 2027. If anything, they need an Alex Killorn on top of the Alex Killorn they have. Find another one. Find another guy who can score about 20 goals a year, has experience, preferably a lot of playoff experience, and maybe a little bit of leadership, And I don't think they need a lot. That's the interesting thing for me with Anaheim. I don't think they need a lot right now in order to compete in what's become a very wide open Western Conference race. Strome, $5 million cap hit for Ryan Strome until 2027. I think Strome's still been good for them. No reason to think that that cap hit necessarily gets moved. Cam Fowler, $6.5 million cap hit until 2026. One thing that's been notable to me over the last year and a half, Fowler's prominence when you're watching Ducks games seems to have fallen off a bit. Offensively, maybe we're looking at Fowler dialing back his game a bit, but he's only under contract till 2026, and that's where some of these young guys are probably going to be getting some healthy raises. So for Fowler, I think he probably stays with the Ducks going forward. And I don't think that contract's bad at all for what Fowler gives them as a top four defenseman. Radko Gudas, $4 million cap hit till 2026. Part of the reason I think that the Ducks are in this position, and people can laugh because if you don't watch the Ducks, it sounds insane. But Radko Gudas being added to this team added something last year, and I would say that's continued this year. He just there's a style of game he plays, there's a defensive style he has that I don't think there's anybody else on the Ducks can play that style. And while people look and go, well, that's not going to add points, I think we get so enamored with the offensive stats sometimes that we can lose sight of what a leadership asset like Gudas can be to a team. And I think he's done that for the Ducks. I think him being willing to sign with the Ducks and stay there for years tells you a lot about how he has some faith in management and what this team is trying to build. John Gibson, $6.4 million cap hit till 2027. And that's the issue with trading Gibson. You would have to retain some money. The contract runs well beyond this season into 2027. So it does make it very difficult to trade Gibson unless you get his value up. In order to get his value up, you have to play him more. The problem with that being Dostal's been so good this year, you can't justify giving Gibson more starts ahead of Dostal to get his resume improved so that he's easier to trade when you're in the playoff hunt. When you're in the playoff hunt, you play your best players. And that means that Dostal being the best goalie, he should get the lion's share of games. So I don't think Gibson's going anywhere, is basically where I'm going with that. They're pending UFA list because you can rent out UFAs at the deadline. Fabry, who of course is injured, as a discussion we have with him annually seems to be. Vetrano's a pending UFA, and Vetrano could be an attractive free agent for somebody at the deadline. Vetrano's only got a couple of goals this year for Anaheim. I don't think he's as vital to them this year as he was last year. And I love Frankie. Like, if tomorrow he's traded back to Boston, I'd do a happy dance. But I do understand that with where Anaheim's at and with what they're building, Vetrano's importance this year is not what it was last year. McGinn, I don't think there's a lot of value there. There might be. Dumoulin is a pending UFA. I think Dumoulin's played pretty well for them too. I talked about Fowler's prominence dropping off a bit. I think Dumoulin's been more prominent this year. And so do they move him at the deadline or do you hold on to him? Because again, if you're close to a playoff spot, veteran defenseman's important, especially when I'm saying adding one more veteran defenseman and adding another veteran forward could probably help this team a lot. I mean, maybe Dumoulin's going the other way if you make a deal like that, right? And then you've got on the way, and I wanted to do this, talk about guys who have yet to come up, that kind of thing, and just to look at it. You've got Seneca. They drafted him very early. They have high expectations for him. I would expect he'll be on the roster next season. Gauthier, spelled different, but as far as I know, Gauthier it's pronounced the same. And I don't think there's a lot of pressure on him to make the team right now either. There's just pressure on him to continue his development. Mijatovic is there as well, or Mijatovic. Solberg on the blue line, and Hines on the blue line as well. Hines got called up. I don't think he played when they called him up, though. But he's been called up once this year already. And then in net, you've got Klang and you've got Clara. And I'm pretty sure I did videos where I've talked about both of them before they were drafted. And they both project to be pretty good NHL goaltenders. I think my point being, Anaheim has everything they need going forward. They have all the young guns you need. There's no need for more tanking and getting draft picks. I think we're looking at a team right now that if Pat Verbeek makes the right move or two, we could suddenly be saying, so Anaheim, out of nowhere, and they could be a playoff team. because the West is that wide open. And I don't think their upcoming schedule is that difficult, considering the teams they could play and they don't, both in the West and in the East. I mean, Vegas and Minnesota are going to be difficult. Toronto will be difficult. The other 7, you could see them win 7 out of 10. Maybe they go 6-3-1 in their next 10, but that would likely put them above the playoff line. And does that change the approach of the Anaheim Ducks when/if that happens? So there you go. The video is a result of me getting a jersey and getting some magnets. That is a big part of it. I get the magnets today. I'm like, Anaheim's playing well. I can do a video on Anaheim. Because I talk very often about teams that aren't doing well. Those videos usually do better than when teams are doing well. But I wanted to talk about a team that's doing well. So even though less people would be as interested in the Ducks, I think they're an interesting case going forward of maybe this is the year that the Ducks finally get better. Maybe this is the year that they buy rather than sell, or at the very least hold at the deadline. So, fingers crossed this is the year, because it does get kind of repetitive when the same teams are always good or the same teams are always bad. So maybe this is the time where the Ducks turn things around. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have already. And if people have any doubt at all that I love the rebrand of the Ducks, this and this, I clearly love the rebrand of the Anaheim Ducks. But thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.